Chapter 71. Father's Day Event. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As Adrian was looking for 2 more targets for his remaining 2 shots of Shooting Star, which is courtesy of his Orion's Wrath skill, a figure from above the clouds was surveying him as well. Canlayan, who was flying beside Adrian, that is acting like his guard, sensed the killing intent that was present above them. Canlayan then saw a figure descending from the cloud that is as fast as the speed of sound. The figure's silhouette was descending at a fast rate and is becoming bigger than anticipated. At first it was the size of an ant, but a few seconds later, it became as big as a bus. Canlayan then urged Adrian to look up, and before Adrian could turn around, Canlayan already transformed back to his original look. Canlayan and the figure clashed about 50 meters away from Adrian and created a shock wave, but fortunately it did not cancel the skill. Unfortunately, Canlayan died in a single shot from the clash of both powers. Adrian was shocked of what happened because that thing just one-shot a dragon. Adrian fired the last 2 shooting stars at it, but it managed to dodge the one of the shooting star and its right wing was grazed by the last one fired. Adrian managed to see the details of the mysterious figure before his screen blacked out and his remaining soulbounds were unsummoned. Adrian's avatar was split in half by the monster named the Thunderbird. Monster. Thunderbird level 200 HP, / 99.99%. Description: Majestic gigantic bird said to one of the rulers of the skies. Its whole body is a giant conductor of natural lightning and could swoop down upon its prey with the sound of thunder and as fast as thunder. These birds are extremely territorial of its territory and would attack anyone haughty enough to fly the same skies that it declared as its territory. Mortal enemies with the great horned snakes and also their favorite meals. Adrian's avatar fell down from the sky and landed on the ground. He was shouting at his incompetence of information gathering that he did not know that thunderbirds actually fly through the skies of the Thrall Plateau. He was about to grumble about his loss of experience and maybe an item, but he heard a system prompt about 2 seconds later. Player Equinox will now revive due to the effects of the skill Yggdrasil's Blessing. Adrian rejoiced because he was given a free revive every 24 hours. He thanked the RPG gods for this wonderful skill that was given to him. Adrian resurrected at the place where his avatar's corpse landed. Well, where the upper body landed anyway. Seriously. Why are there strong monsters up in the sky? Now I know why some of the dragonkin rarely even fly. The sky itself is a whole new battlefield. Adrian grumbled for a few minutes to someone that is non-existent and decided to eat his lunch since he already tested the skills for the Psyche armament. Bow anyways. Equals 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 equals. Adrian logged back inside the game 45 minutes later at the same spot he logged out. He was still inside the Thrall Plateau outskirts anyways. He looked around him before casting glamour once again on himself since it was dispelled when he died and forgot to recast it before logging out due to him grumbling at the air. He also resummoned back his soulbounds because they were sealed back when he died. He once again casted the polymorph skill on them and decided to avert even taking to the skies due to the predator roaming it. Adrian decided to try and head to a town when he spotted a peculiar person, or more specifically an NPC. It was standing just outside the field entrance for the Thrall Plateau. The NPC was peculiar because OT was like as if a person was wearing a bear costume with big guns on its body, both physically and physiologically. The bear was buffed like a bodybuilder and had the name Papa Bear floating above his head. Adrian tried to remember where he read that name and it suddenly clicked. This was the NPC for the time-limited Father's Day event. Adrian did not know what kind of rewards will it give if you accept its mission since it was not in the patch notes, but he decided to try it for the sake of fun. Adrian walked towards the NPC Papa Bear and before he could speak, Papa Bear spoke first. "Dear adventurer, would you spare your precious time for accepting the request of little old me?" Papa Bear said with a cute face, but it was all shattered by its buff body. Adrian just smiled and replied, "Sure." I have nothing better to do anyway. Ooh, finally someone who wants to listen. You see, it seems that somebody kidnapped my son and all I have as evidence is this strand of golden hair. Would you be so kind to accompany me in saving my son? I managed to trace their scent to a cave somewhere. Do you think you could help me as a backup since the strength of the monsters are too much for just myself? Papa Bear said with conviction, but it was difficult to take him seriously because of its character model. Adrian decided to wholeheartedly participate in the event, so he accepted the quest that was given to him. Quest notification: find my son. Papa Bear has been wandering around looking for his son. Help him dive into a cave where he found traces of the perpetrator. Difficulty adjusted in response to player level. Clear reward. Unknown failure. Spanking from Papa Bear. Adrian did not know whether to laugh or cry because of the punishment upon failure. The reward is unknown, but in Adrian's mind it would not be that difficult because the difficulty was scaled to his level. Adrian, along with Papa Bear and his soulbounds, was teleported to an instance dungeon. The instance dungeon was called Aurum Cavern, and like the name implies, there was golden rocks glittering inside the cave. It did not take long before an enemy appeared before them. Monster. Cold Soup Slime level 39 HP, 50,000/50,000, 100%. Description: a monster reminiscent of a slime, but instead of a clear body, it has a soup body. The soup is said to be very healthy for the body and would cure colds and such. Due to it being cold, it has an acquired taste to be able to eat it. It can shoot ice elemental magic at its foes and even a part of itself as a physical missile of sorts. Somewhat immune to physical attacks. Adrian now knows the inspiration for this event. It was from a children's fairy tale. Either way, it is still an enemy. Adrian urged Canlayan to deal with it, and he provided support using his magic. Canlayan fired a breath attack upon the cold soup slime and its health was visibly decreasing. Papa Bear also delayed damage using a flamethrower that suddenly materialized in its hand. It did not take long for the party to deal with the cold soup slime because they used an element that was its counterpart or weakness. The cold soup slime melted, and what filled the cavern was a delicious aroma. You have been allured by the delicious smell of the soup. Satiety decreases by 1% every 5 minutes. Ooh, what a delicious smell that makes my tummy rumble. Papa Bear muttered. We should continue on. We need to find your son in a hurry. We do not even know what happened to him yet. Adrian stated to snap Papa Bear of its current situation. You are right. Let us go. Do not worry, son. Papa is here. Papa Bear shouted and ran past Adrian. Papa Bear's motivation has been increased. His stats are increased by 10%. Adrian tried to shout for Papa Bear to wait for him, but the fellow just left him in the dust. Adrian undoes the polymorph on Sirius and hopped on him so that they could reach the super fast Papa Bear. He held Sina in his arms since it's not that fast compared to Sirius and Canlayan. They arrived at a fork in the road and Adrian ordered Sirius to pick up Papa Bear's scent. Sirius went towards the right path, and a few seconds later sounds of a battle could be heard. They finally arrived at the location of the battle, and Papa Bear was fighting a slime 5 meters tall which was twice as big as the cold soup slime they encountered earlier. Monster. Hot soup slime level 39 HP, 60,000/60,000, 100%. Description: a monster reminiscent of a slime, but instead of a clear body, it has a soup body. The soup is said to be very healthy for the body and would cure colds and such. Due to it being very hot, it has an acquired taste to be able to eat it. It can shoot fire elemental magic at its foes and even a part of itself as a physical missile of sorts. Somewhat immune to physical attacks. Weapons could lose durability upon contact with its body. Adrian then ordered Sina through their soul link to heal Papa Bear as it lost some of its health. He would not let the NPC die on him or else the mission might fail. He also ordered Sirius and Canlaon to strike when there is a chance. He then summoned his psyche armament. Bow, since that is what he is currently familiar with. Adrian then entered the battle. Chapter 72. Father's Day Event Finale. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Adrian with his soulbounds joined the battle that Papa Bear has started. Canlaon fired its breath attack, but instead of completely damaging the hot soup slime, it recovered some health points and even managed to get an attack buff. Adrian ordered Canlaon to stop with its breath attack and deal physical damage instead, since he too was immune to heat. Cena was practically flying behind Papa Bear and continuously healing him because he was taking the brunt of the damage. Adrian used the Soul Piercer toggle skill and generated the piercing effect on his arrows, since he already has max soul essence gauge anyway, and he did not even entertain the idea of using Orion's Wrath skill because the ceiling of the cave could barely fit Canlaon as it was not that high in the first place. Adrian safely launched mana arrows towards the hot soup slime, and it was very effective since it was weak to magic, which is probably why Papa Bear himself could not beat the dungeon, because he deals physical damage using his weapons of mass destruction. The hot soup slime, as if feeling pain, bubbled when it was hit by Adrian's mana arrow and switched aggro towards him. It launched parts of itself toward Adrian at a fast speed that Adrian was not able to dodge. Adrian was hit by about a liter of hot soup with bits of potato in it at his face. His health bar was decreased by 150 due to the sudden attack, and his face was covered with a thick soup base. You have been dealt 150 damage. You have resisted the burn status effect. Your satiety has dropped by 10 due to the delicious aroma. Your satiety is not below 50%. Adrian was a bit frustrated because not only was he damaged but his satiety was lowered even more. A little more lower and he would gain the weakened status, or even worse, the hunger status effect. Adrian decided to just blast the thing with mana arrows when he saw that what looks like a tomato is floating inside the body of the hot soup slime. He remembered that in order for monsters that have liquid form to retain its shape without a container, there was a need for a core. Adrian tried out his hypothesis and tried firing arrows at the tomato in the body with the Soul Piercer mana arrow, and to his surprise the tomato moved out of the way of the mana arrows. Adrian now had an idea on how to kill the hot soup slime, but it seems that the hot soup slime changed aggro towards him again because of what he did. Papa Bear, distract him for me, Adrian shouted while telling his soulbounds through his soul link to assist Papa Bear. Papa Bear nodded and attacked the hot soup slime with more brutality, and even Canlaon and Sirius joined in, which made the aggro shift towards them. Adrian then started using his shooting star skill and aimed at the tomato that was floating inside the hot soup slime's body. He looked for an opening and he found it when Papa Bear threw a grenade inside the hot soup slime's body. The grenade exploded and scattered the some soup base of the hot soup slime, dealing damage to the members at the forefront. Adrian did not miss this opportunity that the hot soup slime was incapacitated and fired the shooting star at the tomato. When the tomato was hit by the skill, it exploded inside the hot soup slime's body and dyed the parts around it red. The hot soup slime's body convulsed and then deflated like a balloon. You have managed to break the hot soup slime's core, thereby immediately killing it. You have gained experience points. Adrian then moved closer to the ones in the forefront and laughed. He did not want to laugh, but they were covered in thick soup. Papa Bear then took out a towel from who knows where and started cleaning himself up, while Sirius just licked himself clean while Canlaon heated the surface of his body until the soup disintegrated. Papa Bear then spoke some words towards Adrian, indicating that the end of the dungeon was near. From Adrian's perspective, he thought that the dungeon was pretty easy, but then again it was an event dungeon and more like a giveaway to player for their patronage, so he does not expect an extravagant award since this was not a main story event. I could smell the owner of this golden hair at the end of that tunnel. Let us hurry. Papa Bear urged Adrian. Adrian complied and they rushed towards the tunnel, and they reached the end a few minutes later. When they reached the end, they were assaulted by an intoxicating aroma that stimulated one's appetite. You have smelled something very delicious and its aroma is dazzling your sense of smell. Your satiety bar drops by 1 every minute. What they have witnessed is the scene of a little witch girl with golden hair stirring a large cauldron with a little bear tossing ingredients in it. It was a sight that would really be seen on children's books, and they were even smiling while cooking whatever was in it. "Son, is that you? Were you here all this time?" Papa Bear asked the little bear. As if surprised by his dad's appearance, the little bear faced Papa Bear, and he looked so cute that you would want to hug it forever. "Papa! What are you doing here? You ruined my surprise for you," the little bear grumbled as he stomped his feet. "Surprise? There were monsters in this cave," Papa Bear said in an angry yet caring tone. "Oh, yeah, about that." As the little bear wandered his eyes towards 2 cauldrons that were empty, Adrian could more or less guess what happened, since he knows that the little girl with golden was a witch. "My friend and I just wanted to cook something special for our dads, but it seems that we messed up the recipe, which led to some complications, but Goldie managed to divert them to the entrance of the cave," the little bear said with an almost crying look. Papa Bear eventually forgave his son for sneaking out and told him to always ask for permission. The little bear also introduced her friend and told them their gift to their dads, which was a soup just right for one's taste. Adrian smiled at what he saw and told himself to hug his dad after this dungeon is over. The little bear waddled towards Adrian and gave him a bowl of soup. "This is thanks for escorting my dad here. Please take it as a reward," the little bear said in a cute tone. Adrian gladly took the bowl and put it inside his inventory. He bid the group farewell and went to the shining magic circle that would deliver him out of the instant's dungeon. When he was out, he logged out and hugged his dad and told him his adventure in the game, which put a smile on his dad's face. Adrian logged back inside the game and took a look at the reward he was given. Item: Just Right Soup Tier. Special Type: Consumable Effect. Recovers satiety to full. Increases the eater's level by 1 when the eater is below level 100. If the eater is above level 100, then he would be given a 50% experience boost for a day. Cannot be traded. Adrian was glad that he was given a free level, which makes him now level 40, and decided to invest his status points to give him a boost in stats. He immediately drank the soup and experienced a sense of euphoria that his mind was blown away the delicious taste, and he even imagined his clothes ripping away from his body. Without even noticing, Adrian drank the whole soup and was disappointed there was none left. He sighed and decided to invest his remaining status points, since he was having a hard time dealing some damage to monsters higher level than him. Adrian put 40 status points into both strength and intelligence, 20 points in agility, 20 points in vitality, and the remaining 30 points was equally invested into both dexterity and endurance. Now his status looks like this. Name: Equinox Race. Deimos, half Asmodean, species. Imp, Lesser Demon, title. Champion of the Twin Gods, Undead Killer, expand, job. Soul Summoner sub-job. Scribe, Beginner, LVL. 40 EXP 33.8% per 100% HP, 3000/3000 MP 1900/1900 VIT. 145 plus 5 STR 170 plus 25 int. 170 plus 20 AGI. 145 plus 10. Dex. 140 plus 15 end. 138 available stat points. 0 skills. Job skills, expand, active skills, expand, passive skills, expand, racial skill. Origin magic, expand. With Adrian's stats alone, he could now contend with a level 70 player that undergone his or her job advancement. Of course he would not do that because he is still a long way from achieving a high ranking in the leaderboards. He was not even in the top 100 for the summoner leaderboards. He could only slap his face and encourage himself. He then remembered the skill book that he put up for auction and decided to view it. When he peered at the current bid price, Adrian fell down on the ground and his soulbound circling him as if they were worried. Chapter 73. Soul form manifestation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Adrian stopped his dramatic response and stood up, he immediately sent a message to his best friend Marlon, the price tag of the skill book. Marlon replied with a shocked face emoji 3 times. The current auction price for the skill book is 10,000 gold and the current exchange rate for gold is $2.5 per gold coin. The two best friends underestimated the demand for such a skill, especially for knights. Knights are one of the most well-known type of warrior job advancement and is the most well-balanced in terms of stats. Knights are said to have almost equal attack and defense, which makes them ideal as substitute tankers but not main tankers. If played well, they could be optimal as a damage dealer and a defender, but a glaring weakness is that they rarely have high damage dealing skills, and paired with balanced stats they do not specialize in something. Nevertheless, being a knight is still popular due to some people that wants to be in servitude of a beautiful princess or are just fond of the medieval era. Knights are a popular job advancement. The reasons for the high selling price of the skill are 2 things. The first reason is the execution mechanic of the skill that kills the target directly, and if used correctly the player could very well become a ranker. The second reason is the high skill damage modifier if the execute failed, which is still very high in comparison to regular knight skills, thus the high demand for the skill specially for warrior players with knight-related professions. They rankers would definitely want this skill, and the price is still rising bit by bit even as Adrian was observing it. The auction would only end if no player bids for the item in about 6 hours since its last bid. Adrian decided to close the auction tab and only focus on leveling up since he still has a long way to go. Adrian looked around to where he was teleported out of the instance dungeon, and he was still at the outskirts of the Thrall Plateau. He told Sirius and Canlain to survey the surroundings and change them to their chibi forms so that if they get spotted by other players they would not even try to attack them and make them harder to spot since they were smaller. A few minutes later Sirius returned while Adrian was petting Sina. It seems that Sirius found something, so through their soul link, Adrian called for Canlain. Adrian really loved the versatility of the soul link because he could give orders just by thinking of them, but of course he had to practice focusing because it takes great mental capabilities to put it in practice. Sirius led the way to a cave that was only about 7 feet in height and was covered by the dense forestry in that area, which concealed it perfectly from the eyes of those who do not search for it intently. A little close to the entrance were items that were more of the miscellaneous variety and some coins. This must have been the result of the notifications that showed in front of Adrian and when Sirius returned in his full form. Adrian picked up the items even though they would be of little value, because who knows when someone might need it anyways. The cave was 7 meters in height while it was only about 1.5 meters in width. It was more fitting for it to be called a crack than a cave. When Adrian used his dark blue evil eye skill, the name of a dungeon popped up. Dungeon. Secret Thrall Plateau Goblin Encampment Outpost. Level requirements. 40-50. Adrian was happy with the unexpected dungeon encounter, and with his soulbounds by his sides they entered. When Adrian regained vision, he was on top of a ridge inside the plateau itself, and from above one could see numerous goblins undergoing training and a large tent at the north of the training grounds. Still, what made Adrian shudder in excitement is the system notification that popped up. You are the first to discover the secret Thrall Plateau Goblin Encampment Outpost. You will gain 2 times the experience and double drop rates for the first clear of this dungeon. With just this dungeon, Adrian will get 6 times the experience with his experience buff stacking. He was excited, but not too excited to just charge right into the fray without assessing the situation. It seems this dungeon only has a single layer, which has its pros and cons. A single layer meant that parties could easily handle the waves of monsters, but the problem is that Adrian was not in a party even though he has great fighting power as a summoner. The vast number of enemies in this dungeon is not a number he and his soulbounds could handle wantonly. Adrian decided to sneak in a little closer, and to do that he used a skill that he has never used as of yet. Skill. Soul Form Manifestation Tier. Legacy Effect. Shrouds the target with the power of limbo and transforms the target into their soul forms. Targets in soul form cannot be harmed by physical attacks but will be dealt twice as much damage by magical attacks. Grants the target invisibility during soul form. Any form of attack by the recipient or being dealt damage will undo the effects of soul form manifestation. Cooldown. 5 minutes cast time. 5 seconds mana cost. 500 mana points. He only used it on himself and told his soulbounds to wait for him to signal their attack. When Adrian used the skill on himself, his body started to fade from existence and turn pale white as if he was only a smoky silhouette. He then turned invisible and his form resembles that of a white specter, but his soulbounds could see him just fine by his assumption because Sina tried to land on his head but passed right through, which she turned her head in confusion. Adrian then moved closer to the training grounds that was filled with goblins that were doing sword swings, target practice using a bow, and a few who were trying to cast spells. Adrian was a bit nervous that he might be seen since a goblin was walking towards him, and he was shocked that the goblin passed right through him, though the goblin looked back, which made Adrian's body paler than it was. It seems that as long as he does not attack or is not hit by magic in this state he is okay, which is why he did not go close to the goblin mage recruits practicing magic. It was their name when Adrian took a look at their status. Monster. Goblin mage recruit level. 45 HP, 35000/35000, 100%. MP 20,000/20,000. Description. A goblin that has potential for magic and pursuing its evolutionary path to become a goblin mage. It possesses low health but greater mana than other goblins. Adrian then looked at the status of the other goblins. Monster. Goblin warrior recruit level. 42 HP, 45,000/45,000, 100%. MP 5000/5000. Description. A goblin who is pursuing to become a goblin warrior that has mastery over weapons that deal physical damage. It possesses higher health and stamina than other goblins. Monster. Goblin ranger recruit level. 40 HP, 33,000/33,000, 100%. MP 10,000/10,000. Description. A goblin pursuing to become a goblin ranger that is capable of hitting targets from afar. It is more nimble than other goblins. Adrian was pondering what to do in this situation because the goblin warrior recruits numbered in the hundreds while the goblin ranger recruits are about less than 100 and the goblin mage recruits numbered about 15. It makes sense that there are few mage recruits because the talent for magic is not common in this world. It only became common when the players arrived, since becoming a mage was very popular since the game's release. It seems the elites are having a meeting in the large tent, but when Adrian was about to go closer, he stopped because it feels as though he should not go closer. It was the right decision because inside that large tent was a goblin mage that could feel mana fluctuations which would alert the goblin commanders that someone snuck inside their encampment. It did not take long for Adrian to be at full mana again, and he went towards the center of the training field. Adrian wanted to test out a theory that he just thought of just now, and that is to channel a spell while in soul form manifestation. Adrian knew the perfect spell for this dungeon, and that was the skill the Vortex. Adrian then started chanting the spell and a black void was formulated in his palm, and it slow but surely rose upwards in the training field. The goblin warrior recruits and goblin ranger recruit did not feel a thing, but the goblin mage recruits suddenly feel mana fluctuation somewhere in the training field but could not detect where it is coming from. With a snap of his fingers, all hell broke loose on the goblin encampment. Chapter 74. A Demon's Rampage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Adrian snapped his fingers, a sound akin to glass breaking occurred, except it was not glass but space itself was the one that broke, and from that broken space a black hole 10 meters in diameter formed and pulled everything that it could muster. Adrian is always impressed by the sheer power of the Vortex skill. Not only did it pull all he views as enemies but even things like fences, swords and any other thing that was not firmly rooted or able to withstand the pulling force of the vortex he summoned. These objects deal additional damage to the enemies sucked into the black hole, which is always a plus in Adrian's eyes, and with that numerous notifications assaulted his sight. You have dealt 3,879 magical damage to a Goblin Ranger recruit. Additional 467 damage has been dealt due to swirling objects in the black hole. You have dealt 4,149 magical damage to a Goblin Mage recruit. Additional 638 damage has been dealt due to swirling objects in the black hole. You have dealt 3,268 magical damage to a Goblin Warrior recruit. Additional 159 damage has been dealt due to swirling objects in the black hole. You have dealt 4,243 magical damage to a Goblin Mage recruit. Additional 827 damage has been dealt due to swirling objects in the black hole. BL.net. This were the notifications that sprung up in Adrian's field of view, and a few seconds later even the tent housing the goblin leaders was sucked into the black hole, revealing a goblin with a robe conjuring up a barrier to prevent the three of them. The two goblin guards that are guarding the entrance of the tent plunged their swords at the ground to anchor themselves to it. Not long after, all the goblins in the training ground were sucked into the black hole. One might think that hundreds of goblins could not fit into a 10-meter diameter black hole, but that would be the uneducated point of view because the concept of space is different inside it. But the game designers have used the idea that the black hole has infinite space and is always swirling. Adrian had more or less an idea of this because he has seen a giant tree being sucked inside of it, and that every inanimate thing or energy sucked inside would become damage for the beings sucked inside. "Canlayan, fire your dragon breath inside of the black hole," Adrian commanded after he saw all of the goblins in the training ground sucked inside the black hole. Canlayan breathed fire directly into the black hole and it was absorbed right in, and explosions could be heard if you listen closely to the sounds produced inside the black hole. But who would be brave enough to come close? The goblin commanders looked at Adrian with hostility that if looks could kill Adrian would probably be death 10 times over. The black hole ceased to exist, meaning the duration has ended, and the goblin commanders hoped that some of their recruits survived the ordeal, but fate was cruel. All the goblin recruits that was expelled from the hole become flashes of light once their corpses landed on the ground. You have successfully killed a Goblin Mage recruit. Experience has been gained. You have successfully killed a Goblin Warrior recruit. Experience has been gained. You have successfully killed a Goblin Ranger recruit. Experience has been gained. Hundreds of notifications like this was popping up in Adrian's vision that he had to turn them off for the time being because it was distracting him. Adrian and his party was immediately given tons of experience that Adrian leveled up about 5 times and his soulbounds leveling up about 7 times. The bigger one of the 3 goblin commanders emitted a battle cry because of what he has seen, but Adrian was unfazed because of his skill. The Goblin Chieftain has used the skill, War Cry. You have resisted the fear status due to your Asmodean prowess. The Goblin Chieftain was fuming with rage and charged towards Adrian, but Adrian's eyes was glued to another area. Adrian was looking at a metal cage that was previously covered with a dirty cloth, and it was revealed to be a group of caged individuals which mostly consisted of human females. Adrian was enraged even though they were just game characters, but actually seeing victims in close proximity is different from just reading about it or seeing it in the media. Adrian already knew what was done to them due to some having dead eyes while some had their legs cut off. There were even children inside the cage. Adrian flared with anger and ordered Sirius and Canlayan via their soul link, which was either a good choice or a bad one since even Adrian's anger was transmitted to his soulbounds. Destroy them. Leave nothing behind. Adrian commanded in a heavy tone as Adrian's glamour was dispelled by a spell of the Goblin Mage that Adrian did not even bother dodging. Adrian's skin tone changed and his horns were revealed that the goblins were surprised. Sirius headed straight for the Goblin Ranger while Canlayan charged towards the Goblin Mage. The 3 goblin commanders was almost near Adrian when he executed those commands, and he was finally shown their status. Monster. Goblin Ranger level 48 HP 60,000/60,000 100%. MP 20,000/20,000 description. An evolved species of goblin that is specialized in using ranged weapons such as bows. It is more agile and nimbler than its other evolved goblin counterparts. It uses guerrilla tactics to deal with its prey in a mocking way. It likes to toy with its targets rather than killing them immediately. Monster. Goblin Mage Level. 48 HP 50,000/50,000 100%. MP 50,000/50,000 description. An evolved species of goblin that is specialized in using mana. It managed to learn how to properly wield the mana inside its body, thereby evolving to a goblin species capable of harnessing it. It has higher degree of intelligence compared to its evolved goblin counterparts. It is capable of using elemental magic. From Adrian's point of view, it was not this too who posed a threat but the goblin who was the same size as that of an adult male that was charging towards him. Monster. Goblin Chieftain Level. 50 HP 100,000/100,000 100%. MP 40,000/40,000 description. An evolved species of the goblin warrior that is known for its robust and immense physical force. The goblin chieftain is considered to be the third strongest existence, only below that of a goblin general. It knows how to lead an army of goblins to assault towns and villages. It is said that if goblins are becoming organized and raiding towns or villages in an orderly fashion, then there is a goblin chieftain in the vicinity giving them commands. The goblin chieftain about to charged recklessly towards Adrian when the two goblin warriors that were level 45 stopped it by uttering some words in a language not familiar to Adrian. The goblin chieftain stopped its charge, and instead the two goblin warriors were the ones that are going to confront Adrian first, because the goblin mage told them that the demon has exhausted all its mana just in conjuring up that spell. The goblin mage was right. Now Adrian only had about 100 or so mana left, and he was out of mana potions which he forgot to restock due to being too excited to level up. Adrian was only now relying on his mana regeneration to restore his mana. The two goblin warriors were glaring at Adrian as they charged towards him. Adrian activated Geoforce and enlarged his Demi-Dot gauntlets. Due to his level rising, the Demi-Dot gauntlets dealt more damage now that they have dealt before. The goblin warriors were using good coordination, and what's more, they were buffed by the goblin chieftain. The goblin chieftain used Chieftain's Valor. All subjects under it have 15% stat increase and will deal 5% more damage. The chieftain glared at Adrian before heading towards the goblin mage to assist it, since it was having a hard time fending off the dragon that was spewing fire at it as it continued to be in the defensive rather than chanting spells. The goblin chieftain obviously knew that the demon before them was a summoner, and the easiest way to defeat a summoner's monsters was not attacking it but directly dealing with the summoner itself, but the demon in front of them was different. Not only was it incredibly adept at using magic, but he could also sense immense physical strength from it, which was expected of a demon because their goblin ancestors always viewed demons as the incarnation of destruction. The goblin elders always recount their story of ancient times about demons having immense physical and magical prowess that it could put any goblin king to shame with just one flick of its finger. The goblins know of the difference of demons and devils, since their goblin kings was afraid of demons, not devils, and that message was passed to their generation time and time again. Yet, the goblin chieftain did not fear this demon in front of him because its horns are yet to emerge. In their stories, the demons have imposing horns filled with power and a presence that would make others bow down before them, but this one did not. The goblin chieftain decided to aid his other commanders first so that it would be easier to take out the demon invading them. Its two summons were also strong because it was the mighty great lizard and a dog of destruction. Chapter 75. An Elf's Tale. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Adrian was busy doing his dungeon run, a certain individual has already returned to his church and is currently planning his strategy on how to tackle a certain mission. Quest notification uncover the truth. Link quest. The Church of Life has concealed the records of history containing the creation of the world. Retrieve these records and make sure that the higher-ups of the church do not know of your identity. Clear condition. Find records of the real history of the world without being suspected. Reward. Random epic skill book, priest job class, failure. Excommunicated by the churches aligned with good final link quest reward. Unique job class envoy of the twin gods. Time limit. Nun Levin Cloud, aka Marlon, was pondering this greatly as how he would do this quest. As a child of Gia, he has access to certain documents in the church that would not be available to other ordinary priest job class players. But that did not mean that he has full access to all of the church's records. Though he is a child of Gia, he only has started training as one and is still not that influential in the Church of Life. In terms of hierarchy, he is like a bishop with his current standing, and he needs to be at least a cardinal to access the records that he needs. He figured that important records such as the history of the world would have to be in the main cathedral, which is in the elven village, but it would be impossible for him to actually just waltz there because even the elves did not take players as trustworthy. The inhabitants of this world tolerate them because they believe that the gods have sent them to aid them, and some did while some do not, which is why the relationship between NPCs and players is shaky. Nevertheless, there are some NPCs that are easy to increase in intimacy while others are downright impossible. What Marlon had in mind is visit old abandoned churches of the Church of Life and investigate from there. He had a hunch that there should at least be some king of records left in them, even if it is just incomplete. Which is why when he arrived at the main cathedral of the Church of Life in the Elven territory, he went straight to get pilgrimage missions. Pilgrimage missions are missions in where the devotee will travel to locations of other churches, be it new, old, or destroyed, to check about whether the church is operating properly or needs to be rebuilt. The main cathedral of the Church of Life is located in the elven country of Neo-Alfheim. It is where the world tree, Yggdrasil, or the Tree of Life, is currently planted in this world, which is why the surroundings here is clean and pure, because of the world tree that purifies polluted mana and refreshes the surroundings. It is also a famous place for spiritualists, a job class advancement for shamans, to go because elemental spirits love to visit places with pure mana. The houses in Neo-Alfheim is quaint and blends well with nature, and tree houses are common here due to the elves wanting to be close to nature. Unlike what is told in old tales that elves do not use fire and eat meat, here they do, because according to them a person would not be able to live just by eating vegetables or fruits alone, especially if one was to go in battle. The main cathedral is located near the world tree and is actually the second tallest tree in the area, and is said to have been made by the ancestor of the elves, a high elf with powers to manipulate nature itself. The entrances and the windows of the main cathedral were not carved, but it was like a natural hole that the tree itself made, and is considered as one of the most mystical place in the Poles according to the Pandemonium community. The lighting used for the insides of the cathedral and the other houses were of the Lumenlian. The Lumenlian is a plant that is similar to an orchid that absorbs some of the light from the plant it is grafted into and would only shine when it is dark. It could remain lit for 7 days even after it was plucked. It looks like a giant dandelion about the size of a bowling ball with little bulbs that emit a radiant white glow at the end of its seed head. Levin Cloud hurriedly went to the church administrator to look for pilgrimage quests. He went to a room where an elf that could be seen with wrinkles in his face could be seen. An elf naturally stops aging at 50 years old, but that did not mean they would retain the look of a 50-year-old man. Elves age differently compared to other species. At ages 1 to 15 in human years, the elf would look like a child of age 8. At 16 to 30 human years, the elf would look like a premature teen. At 31 to 45 human years, the elf will look like a teenager. At 46 and above, the elf will stop aging as he will look like an adult, but a special case would be when an elf is nearing the end of their long lifespan of generally 400 to 500 years old. The elf would develop wrinkles signifying that their long life will soon come to an end. Of course, on how soon, even the elves themselves do not the definite answer, but it would usually be in a year or less than 100 years. Elder Willow, it is nice to see you here and very healthy, I might add, Levin Cloud said, starting a conversation with the old elf. Levin Cloud, my apprentice, it seems you are doing fine and even became stronger than when you left. How may I help my apprentice? Elder Willow said in a fatherly tone. Elder Willow was the elf which introduced the test for being chosen as a child of Gia to Levin Cloud and ultimately became his master because Elder Willow taught him the ropes on how to be a good priest in the Church of Life. Levin Cloud encountered him when he saw an old man and helped him carry the grocery that he was struggling to carry. Little did Levin Cloud know that he was actually helping an elder of the Church of Life but also an esteemed elf who could use nature magic, which is one of the reasons Marlin took the earth element, as his master did the same to attain nature magic. Levin Cloud looked at the old elf with deep respect and appreciation, like what he would do to his grandfather if he actually known his grandfather. Also, Elder Willow was one of the most caring elders in the church and had no prejudice when it comes to matters regarding on who could be a candidate for the Child of Gia position or not. I want to go take pilgrimage quests to old and abandoned churches, Levin Cloud stated. Oh. Why do you want to, my boy? There are barely anything useful in our abandoned churches anyway, and they are usually located near danger zones. I can't assign paladins to you if you were to go to some. They have been infested by monsters after all. Elder Willow said after raising a brow because of the somewhat ridiculous request of his apprentice. I want to purify the lands from the monsters there so that weary travelers could rest upon the abandoned churches even if they are not being manned. I want to prove myself that I am useful to our church, Levin Cloud said, having a slightly nervous tone. Elder Willow knows that the boy before him has another agenda, but from their past interactions, he could most definitely say that it is not harmful to the church because the child in front of him was too pure to do evil schemes. So he opted to indulge the boy in his decision and him as any wise master would to his apprentice. He breathed a sigh and passed the boy a piece of paper containing a pilgrimage mission that is appropriate for his power. Quest notification. Pilgrimage to the Blue Valley. The Church of Life wants you to see and investigate the ruins of an abandoned church in the Blue Valley that has been abandoned for a few centuries when a beast flood suddenly attacked that area. Requirements. Level 50 and above, clear conditions. Submit a report on the state of the abandoned church. Failure. Decrease in reputation to the Church of Life. Time requirements. None. Levin Cloud thanked and bowed to the elder for giving him a favorable quest. He departed after saying his goodbyes to his master and restocking on supplies. He hopes that the place he would visit have traces of the world's history. Little did he know that his master sensed residual aura of the goddess in him and sent him to a place where he may or may not find some clues. Chapter 76. Slayer of Goblins. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The Goblin Chieftain went towards the direction where Canlayan and the Goblin Mage were fighting in order to assist its fellow Goblin commander. Adrian, who saw this, tried to chase after the Goblin Chieftain but was unable to because of the two Goblin warriors blocking his way. Adrian was only able to one-shot a Goblin warrior before due to aiming at its head and the high damage modifier that the skill has and also the penetrating effect. His current mana is 233 and is currently rising 1 point every 3 seconds, which is already considered fast in terms of his level grade. But the real reason for the great mana regeneration is his accessory items. Adrian had no choice but to kill these Goblin warriors first in order to aid Canlayan, so instead he told Sina to support Canlayan for the time being, and the albino magpie flew towards her fellow soulbound. Adrian is now facing two buffed Goblin warriors by himself, but he looked excited instead of scared. He immediately used Assault Charge towards one of the two Goblin warriors, and they were caught by surprise because their attention partially shifted when Sina flew towards the Goblin Mage like their chieftain. You have dealt 3,548 physical damage to a Goblin warrior. The Goblin warrior that was not targeted immediately tried to stab Adrian, but he cast Chrono Lag and the movement of the slash became slow that Adrian was able to dodge in time. Thankfully, he has full stock of essences and is currently having a 10% buff on all his stats due to the Soul Collector passive skill. Adrian then bashed his gauntlets on the goblin warrior who performed the slash since it still performed it even though it was slowed down. The goblin warrior was not able to dodge the punch Adrian had thrown because of the weight of the rebound of the sword. Adrian managed to hit it right in the face. You have dealt 5,668 physical damage to a goblin warrior. It seems that hitting their head was more damaging than Adrian thought it would because the goblin warriors did not even wear helmets to protect themselves from harm. It was only the goblin chieftain who wore a skull helmet of an unknown reptilian creature. Adrian had to finish this quickly because Canlaon's health bar was being drained though it would rise a few times. The decrease was greater than the increased value, meaning it was only a matter of time before both Sina and Canlaon fall in battle. Even if Adrian has the rewind skill, it would be useless if he was not in the vicinity. He started getting more aggressive in finishing the buffed goblin warriors rather than paying attention to his health bar. Meanwhile, a few meters away from Adrian's location, Sirius was having a battle with the goblin ranger. Their battle was more on the concept of the hunter versus the hunted, as the goblin ranger would install traps so that Sirius would not be able to come close to it since a goblin ranger is weak in close range battle. It seems that the tactic was working and Sirius was now on the defensive. Without Adrian guiding it fully, it was not able to maximize its fast speed and destructive power. Adrian, as if feeling the indecisive nature of Sirius, started to give some commands, albeit not directly since he does not know of the situation of Sirius' battle. Instead, he told Sirius to use Portal Assault if he is cornered, and once the Goblin Ranger was in range for Phantom Rush, use it to his advantage. He also told him to not use the Ragnarok skill as they would need to use it later for the chieftain. Sirius now had concrete instructions, albeit vague, had an idea on how to deal with the Goblin Ranger. Sirius now tried to be on the offensive as the effective target range for the Goblin Ranger is 50 meters. Sirius tried what his master said and used Portal Assault to close in the gap between him and the Goblin Ranger. Using Portal Assault, Sirius could travel a maximum distance of 10 meters, but he could only close the gap by 7 meters because the Goblin Ranger would increase the gap by 3 meters since it would retreat. Sirius did not give up and continued his pursuit, triggering some traps along the way which reduce his health since it was mostly spike traps. When Sirius was now 10 meters apart from the Goblin Ranger, he immediately used Phantom Rush and started bombarding the Goblin Ranger with scratches and bites. It did not take long for bleed status to stack upon the Goblin Ranger and Sirius's agility stacks to go up, thus making it a fearsome opponent to enemies who are alive. Phantom Rush ended and the remaining health of the Goblin Ranger was only 1/3 of its original health. Sirius used Portal Assault once again to close the distance, but it seemed that the Goblin Ranger has predicted where Sirius would appear from and fired an arrow towards Sirius that has a brown energy. Sirius was knocked back by 40 meters and the Goblin Ranger took some distance towards him, but it seems the hunter has now become the hunted. A few meters away from Adrian, another set of battle is going on. This battle was between the Goblin Mage with the Goblin Chieftain and Canlaon with Sina. Random bursts of fire and magic being hurled could be seen in this battle, with the occasional sword slash coming from the Goblin Chieftain. Canlaon was pressuring the Goblin Mage on the defensive at first, but things changed when the Goblin Chieftain entered the battle. Canlaon now had to juggle with two enemies. Thankfully Sina rushed to his aid and healed him, but the fight was still difficult. The Goblin Chieftain was now blocking his breath attack due to it being buffed by the Goblin Mage it is fighting, and Canlaon was also getting hit by dark bullets and other bullet-like elemental magic that was not fire attribute since he was immune to the fire attribute. When Canlaon was finished firing its breath attack, the Goblin Chieftain would jump towards him and slash his scales with a sword. Even if dragon scales were extremely hard, as the legends says, that could not be held true if it was just a newborn dragon and a low-leveled one at that. Dragons were creatures that do not associate themselves with lower life forms since they pride themselves as the strongest race. Newborn dragons would be well protected by their parents since they are still not mature enough, and beings higher leveled than them could easily kill a dragon, which is how some characters or NPCs in the game possessed the Dragon Slayer title. Even if it was child, it was still a dragon, which is why they were eligible to get the title, but the stories did not explain what happened next. What happened next was the parent of the dragon, angered at what the NPC has done, devastated the country, erasing it from the map, which is why there is no longer an NPC with the title of Dragon Slayer alive. At least that is what Pan told Adrian when Canlaon hatched. The goblin chieftain managed to scratch Canlaon's scales because it was higher leveled than him, and Canlaon was still a juvenile in terms of dragon age. With magic attacks and physical attacks bombarding Canlaon, it was not a mystery why its health points was already down to half, even with Sina's continuous healing, and even Sina was also losing stamina, since in terms of strength it was the weakest of the three soulbounds because it was still a magpie despite carrying a mythical bird strain. The fight was not one-sided though, as Canlaon would counterattack every time the goblin chieftain would slash at it, and the high mana pool of the goblin mage was now only 1/4 of its original. It consistently formed mana barriers on itself before the goblin chieftain came to its aid, and it also depleted a lot, forming attack spells and enchantments, which is why its high mana pool was now a measly 1/4 of its original. The goblin mage was desperate in killing the dragon before it because it could sense the goblin ranger's waning life force as it was low. The goblin mage started casting Mana Burn, which would deal the same damage as the mana expended in exchange for bringing the user's health down to 10% of the total maximum health. Mana Burn is called the Glass Cannon suicide skill for the mage class job because of its drawbacks. Not only does it lower your health to 10% of the maximum, it also puts you in a weakened state and permanently lowers your intelligence stat by 3%, but mages still get this skill in case of emergencies, and their guilds also encourages them to get it. The goblin mage was supposed to finish chanting the Mana Burn skill when a dark crescent energy managed to hit it despite being blocked by the shield of the goblin chieftain. Chapter 77. Slayer of Goblins 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Adrian, now having dealt about half of the health of the two goblin warrior as damage, now had enough mana to use his summon Psyche armament skill. He put some distance between the two goblin warriors and shouted the skill name. Summon Psyche armament, sword. What occurred was what usually happens when he uses that skill, in which his demi-dot gauntlets, but he forgot to cancel the Geoforce effect because he was too focused on battle. The sword appeared in front of him, but instead of the previous small version that first appeared when he first used the skill, the greatsword version of the weapon appeared. It seems that whatever effect was applied to his current weapon would also carry out to the Psyche armament. Adrian took hold of the greatsword, and contrary to its looks, it weighed nothing at all. But to his enemies that the greatsword would strike, the sword would weigh a lot. The only way to counter Adrian's weapon was a dis-arming skill, but even that would only work by a 50.50 chance because of Adrian's skill to ignore status conditions. The two goblin warriors did not charge towards Adrian because they were wary of the weapon the demon in front of them was suddenly holding. The greatsword looked heavy due to its immense size, but the demon in front of them was swinging it like it was a stick. Before the two goblin warriors could snap out of their confusion, a black crescent energy was already heading towards them. The two goblin warriors, who had about more or less 50% of their health points, was reduced down to merely 20% of their health with a single skill shot. Meanwhile, even the one who released the skill was also flabbergasted due to the immense damage that he had dished out. Not only did he manage to hit the two goblin guards, but he also managed to damage the goblin mage and goblin chieftain because they entered the extended range of the skill. You have dealt 17,368 physical damage to the goblin warrior. You have dealt 17,388 physical damage to the goblin warrior. You have dealt 10,955 physical damage to the goblin mage. You have successfully managed to cancel the spell casting of the goblin mage. It cannot invoke spells in the next 10 seconds. You have dealt 8,257 physical damage to the goblin chieftain. Adrian was surprised because the damage modifier of the skill that he used was not high, but on top of the skill damage, he also consumed some essences to strengthen the skill. What Adrian used was not the third skill of the Psyche armament but its first skill, which is why even he was surprised. Skill: Soul-Searing Crescent Wave Tier. Legacy Type. Active Effect. Send out a dark crescent sword wave of energy in front of you that deals damage equal to 150% of your total physical attack as physical damage and travels up to 10 meters. Cannot be blocked using physical defense skills as it is treated as a magic projectile despite dealing physical damage. Cooldown. 10 seconds cast time. Instant essence cost. 10. Adrian further empowered the skill using 20 essences and was gladly surprised by the large damage that he dealt. It seems that essences greatly increases the damage of the skill and he would need test how much amplification can the essences could give him. He thought it was impossible to empower the psyche armament skills, but it seems he was mistaken, but if one thought about it would be called as extremely wasteful. Using psyche armament skills meant that he would consume essences when casting them, and if he consumed some more to amplify the damage he would be mostly left with nothing. He needs to balance cost and effectiveness if he was going to use this strategy. The skill also traveled more than 10 meters, unlike what the skill description has stated, which means it was probably due to the essence and the geoforce status of the sword. The sword wave was much bigger due to the area of the arc that he made when he swung the sword sideways. It even traveled all the way to the place where Canlaon and Cena was taking place, which was about more or less 50 meters from Adrian's location. Adrian was now full of confidence due to his high damage and charged towards the two goblin warriors. The two goblin warriors were surprised by the action of the demon because there was clear bloodlust in its eyes as it charged towards them. The two goblin warriors did not face Adrian combined but rather one at a time. The first one would parry the sword while the other one would strike at the opponent while the first one was holding the Adrian down. What happened was contrary to what the two goblin warriors thought of what should have happened. When the first goblin warrior tried to hold down Adrian's sword, the goblin warrior was blown away instead because of the sheer weight that collided with its sword. The goblin warrior was flung 5 meters away and it even let go of its sword. The second goblin warrior was too stunned to do a follow-up attack and became frozen with fear. Adrian then swung his overdot-sized sword towards the neck of the second goblin warrior and was greeted by a notification that was pleasing to the eye. You have successfully executed the goblin warrior. Experience has been earned. Even though Adrian had a permanent 1% chance to execute any enemy, that did not mean that he would be able to execute one enemy out of every 100 or so enemies. The probability is defined as he has a 1% chance to execute an enemy individual, and this is for each individual. It does not mean that if he has not executed the first enemy then that would mean he would get 1 out 99 chances. Take for example when he cast Vortex. He dealt damage to hundreds of goblin recruits yet not even one of them was executed. It was all for Arensus to decide if he wanted to grace Adrian with an enemy execute. Adrian now charged towards the remaining goblin warrior and finished it off by overpowering it using sheer strength and the weight of the sword. It did not take long for it to fall and become specks of light. Adrian now looked towards Sirius' place of battle and he could see that he was in an advantage. Adrian was about to look towards Canlaon and Cena's place of battle when something came crashing towards him. Adrian was knocked back 10 meters away and has received damage equal to 20% of his total health. He caught a glimpse of the attacker and it was no other than the Goblin Chieftain. It seems furious and charged towards Adrian when he was not paying attention, which was a mistake on Adrian's part because he thought he would be safe because Canlaon was in battle with it. It seems that all the aggro was shifted towards him when he killed the two goblin warriors. He could also see that the Goblin Chieftain was buffed by 3 kinds of buffs from his inspection. The Goblin Chieftain even became enraged despite having 90% of its health points remaining. Monster. Goblin Chieftain status. Haste, increased regeneration, strengthened, enraged. When monsters become enraged they usually exhibit double the power, and with all the buffs the Goblin Chieftain has it was a no-brainer why Adrian was flung 10 meters. The Goblin Chieftain continued its rampage towards Adrian and the latter responded by charging towards it also. The two swords clashed and sparks flew. Adrian thought he had the upper hand but he was pushed by 2 feet, which means the strength of the Goblin Chieftain exceeded his and the weight of the Geoforced sword combined. Adrian retreated immediately but was not given much breathing room because the Goblin Chieftain kept following it. Adrian's brain was working on fast mode and he decided to cast Chrono Lag to slow down the pursuit of the Goblin Chieftain. The debuff worked but the Goblin Chieftain was easily covering the distance. Left with no choice, Adrian decided to use the second skill attached to the sword Psyche armament. Twin Fong form, Adrian stated. The great sword split into two parts in the middle and became two single-edge blades. Adrian became faster due to the effect of using this form. Skill. Twin Fong form tier. Legacy type. Toggle. Effect. Splits the double-edged sword into two to become single-edge blades. While in this form, the wielder is granted a 10% increase in damage and a 20% increase in agility. The active skill Soul Searing Crescent Wave will release one sword wave each blade but would deal half damage each compared to the original. If activated again, it would combine the two single-edge blades once again to form a double-edged sword. Cooldown. 0.5 second cast time. Instant essence cost. 5 per form change. Chapter 78. Slayer of Goblins 3. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Adrian now holding to two blades that still is big considering it is bigger than Adrian himself. It seems that the Goblin Chieftain now put him in the priority list rather than helping its fellow commanders. It deemed it necessary to finish off Adrian rather than aid the Goblin Mage. Adrian was now in a fierce one-on-one battle with the Goblin Chieftain. Due to his increased agility, even the enraged Goblin Chieftain is having a hard time attacking Adrian. Adrian was weaving through the battlefield as if he was doing a sword dance and his strikes started becoming illusionary, which confuses the Goblin Chieftain as he could not parry some of the strikes. Although Adrian weaving his body in a circular motion to cover all the surroundings of the Goblin Chieftain is proving effective, it also greatly drains his stamina, which is why he decided to use the Twin Fong form of the first skill of the sword to hasten killing the Goblin Chieftain. Skill. Soul Searing Crescent Wave, Twin Fong version, tier. Legacy type. Active effect. Send out a dark crescent sword wave of energy in front of you that deals damage equal to 75% of your total physical attack as physical damage and travels up to 10 meters. You can fire one dark crescent sword wave per blade. The skill cooldown will only take effect once both sword waves have been fired. Cannot be blocked using physical defense skills as it is treated as a magic projectile despite dealing physical damage. Cooldown. 10 seconds cast time. Instant essence cost. 10. Adrian fired off the first sword wave using his left blade and aimed it at the right ankle of the Goblin Chieftain. The Goblin Chieftain was unaware of what hit him and suddenly wailed in pain as it looks at its right leg having been damaged. L.RG, you have dealt 5,763 physical damage to the Goblin Chieftain. Due to the increase in damage and his soul essence stacks having been full, Adrian now dealt serious damage even to the boss monster. Adrian did not fire the second sword wave because he caught sight of the Goblin Ranger. He was only about 20 meters away from it and he suddenly had a great idea that could be beneficial for Sirius. Adrian taunted the Goblin Chieftain by smirking in a condescending fashion and it proved useful as it started following him. Adrian led it near the area where Sirius and the Goblin Ranger were fighting, and when the Goblin Chieftain was in striking zone for the skill, Adrian smiled, and if he did not notice his smile could give someone the creeps because he smiled just like a demon. Sirius use Phantom Rush, Adrian ordered using the Soul Link. Sirius disappeared in place and broke the world's limits and attacked the Goblin Chieftain continuously until the bleed status effect has maximized and it was full of bruises. Adrian did not stay idle though, as he used Chrono Lag on the Goblin Ranger as it entered the maximum distance and used the remaining sword wave to strike the Goblin Ranger. You have successfully slain the Goblin Ranger. Experience points has been gained. You have leveled up. The Goblin Ranger died just like that, but Adrian did not take a break or look at the dropped loot because a notification suddenly appeared that worried him a bit. The Goblin Chieftain has entered Berserker mode. All its status values will increase by 20%, but it will not differentiate between friend and foe. One of the most annoying mode for a boss is Berserk mode because it has a great rise in stats but also the hidden effect for aggro. Any boss monster who become Berserk will not have an aggro function and would attack anyone who strikes at it. Some would say this is beneficial, but others would argue because it is not useful for small parties, especially in the case of Adrian right now, as the Goblin Chieftain is bashing Sirius and is in the brink of dying. Adrian decided to switch the target to him, so while the Goblin Chieftain was busy catching Sirius and not paying attention to him, he went into a sprint and then jumped. Adrian then plunged his twin swords at the shoulders of the Goblin Chieftain. The leather armor that the Goblin Chieftain showed a bit of resistance, and he was only able to plunge the two swords about 3 inches deep, but still the Goblin Chieftain wailed in pain. The Goblin Chieftain tried to shake Adrian off immediately, and it was successful. Adrian did a circular motion in the air and unfolded his wings to regain balance and land safely. Adrian also ordered Sirius to recuperate at Cena's side and help his fellow soulbounds in dealing with the Goblin Mage. Sirius reluctantly agreed, as it was now only running on a quarter of its max health. Adrian was reserving his Invigorate skill when all of them are facing Goblin Chieftain, as his soulbounds would be the one tanking damage when they arrive. Adrian looked at the health of the Goblin Chieftain and he saw it was still at 65%. It seems its regeneration is as a lesser troll. It must have a skill that toughens itself and increases regeneration when undergoing Berserk mode. Adrian decided to stall the Goblin Chieftain since the Goblin Mage is now struggling with Canlaon's barrage of attacks that included its breath attack and tail strikes. The Goblin Mage's mana was visibly going down as it continued to cast its mana shield when blocking Canlaon's attacks. It was now hanging on to its 5% mana as a last resort, and when it was about to be emptied out, the Goblin Mage casted an immediate spell and consumed 30% of its health to regain 30% of its mana back. When Canlaon noticed the phenomenon, he became visibly irritated as the prey managed to hang on by a thread. Canlaon was irritated, but it knows that the enemy before them was only prolonging the fight, as it could no longer attack them because the Goblin Chieftain suddenly charged towards its master. Canlaon has perfect trust and knows that its master is capable to hold the Goblin Chieftain at bay. Canlaon was unleashing its breath attack at the Goblin Mage when it saw its eldest brother, Sirius, going towards them. The soulbound hierarchy will be explained in the succeeding chapters. Sirius growled, and Cena, who was perched on top of Canlaon, flew towards Sirius and casted its healing skills at the former. A few minutes passed and Sirius was back to 55% maximum health and joined the assault towards the Goblin Mage, which converted 15% of its health once again as mana. The Goblin Mage was keen on protecting itself using its mana shield, but did not expect its worst enemy to appear. Sirius immediately used Phantom Rush the moment he was able to, and its field of view became colored in gray. Sirius started off with a swipe attack to the Goblin Mage's face, then bite attacks at its arms and legs. The Goblin Mage did not know what was attacking it or how to defend against it, as its health was visibly reducing. To make matters worse, the Goblin Mage was hit by the breath attack and was losing health faster. It was no longer able to cast Mana Shield because of its lack of concentration. It did not take long for the Goblin Mage to become specks of light. The soulbounds hurried towards Adrian's location as they could feel that their master was fatigued. The first to reach was Canlaon, as Sirius was somewhat tired from the recent battle. Canlaon immediately struck the Goblin Chieftain with its tail and managed to knock it back. The Goblin Chieftain suddenly shifted its aggro towards Canlaon and it suddenly used a skill. The Goblin Chieftain jumped high that it almost reached the cave's ceiling and hurled itself downwards like a comet. Canlaon was caught off guard and was pinned to the ground. Adrian saw what happened and immediately ordered Sirius to use Ragnarok, as Canlaon was being pounded continuously back towards the ground. If others saw this scene they would be in disbelief, as a goblin was able to pin down a 10-meter dragon. Though Canlaon was only taking moderate damage, but it was constantly getting affected by the stagger status effect. Sirius was visibly angered as he could see his little brother getting pinned towards the ground, which is why it activated its Ragnarok skill immediately. The silhouette of a giant wolf-like creature appeared as Sirius charged towards the Goblin Chieftain. The Goblin Chieftain sensed the killing intent and looked towards the source but was not able to defend against the attack as it hit the Goblin Chieftain's body directly. Goblin Chieftain roared in pain and a visible hole can be seen on its stomach, but it still had 10% of its health remaining. It was then a giant ghoulish sword materialized above its head and it plunged down, creating black smoke and generated a shockwave that blew debris and small stones away from its location. Chapter 79. Ominous title. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You have successfully slain the Goblin Chieftain. Experience has been gained. Player Equinox has leveled up 2 times, Soulbound Sirius has leveled up 3 times, Soulbound Canlayan has leveled up 3 times, Soulbound Cena leveled up 3 times, Weapons Mastery has increased in Skill Mastery. Player Equinox has achieved the title Goblin Slayer. When these slur of notifications showed in Adrian's vision, he sighed and laid on the ground because his stamina bar is already in the red. He was smiling as he gazed at the dungeon's ceiling. It was an electrifying feeling when he used the last skill for the Sword Psyche armament. Skill: Soul Avenger tier. Legacy type. Active effect. Deal damage dependent on the amount of health the target has lost. Damage starts from 500% physical damage to 1500% physical damage to a single target. Enemies near the target will also be damaged by 70% of the total damage that the target was dealt with. Cooldown: 3 hours cast time. 3 seconds skill cost. 50 essences. It was Adrian's last attempt, since if he prolonged the battle any longer his stamina will plummet and then his satiety will go down further and he would lose health even just by walking. Now he knows why this skill costed 50 essences just to activate. The skill itself was devastating in terms of damage, especially the area of effect is pretty useful during swarms of enemies. Adrian rose up from the ground when his stamina bar was recovered to almost 30% and proceeded to take all of the loot that he previously did not pay attention to. He picked up tons of coins and even managed to amount about 105 gold pieces, which was a sizable amount. If a raid party were to equally distribute the gold collected for 20 persons, since a maximum of 20 people could enter this dungeon scenario, then they would be given a measly 5 gold in return for a lot of work. This is one of the reasons that players usually avoid farming humanoid enemies or NPCs, because they drop items in smaller amounts compared to beast-like monsters. The goblin recruits dropped some armors and weapons, but it was mostly of common and uncommon quality, which was useless in Adrian's eyes since players at this stage had at least 1 or 2 rare quality items. What caught his eye though was the items that each boss monster dropped. Each boss monster dropped an item and a skill book each. It was due to the first explorer reward that increased the odds of dropping items. The Goblin Ranger dropped a rare quality crossbow and the skill book for knockback arrow, which is also rare quality. The Goblin Mage dropped a rare quality robe and a rare quality skill book for chain lightning. The most prized of all that Adrian has looted was an epic quality broadsword and an epic quality skill book for stampede, which is for warriors. Adrian looked at the description for each item and weapon while he was still resting. Weapon: Red Sparrow crossbow tier. Rare level requirement. 45 description. A red crossbow with its tip shaped like a bird's head and is reminiscent of a bird gliding. It is the favorite weapon for rangers who wants faster fire rate but lesser damage compared to a traditional bow. Damage modifier: 50.60 attack speed. 1.2 weight. 20 units restrictions. Bow Mastery or Ranger Job Class or Weapons Mastery Armor. Darkness Magus Robe tier. Rare level requirement. 45 description. A robe infused with dark attribute magic and is mostly used by practitioners of dark magic. It is dreary and might give the wearer bad luck, but it is not proven. It may be uncomfortable to wear, but it is light on the body. Dark magic resistance plus 10% light attribute resistance, 5% dark magic mastery plus 1 dark magic damage plus 5% weight. 5 units restrictions. Magic related job class weapon. Tribal broadsword tier. Epic level requirement. 50 description. A broadsword used by chieftains of a certain species as both a weapon and a ceremonial artifact. Only leaders who have proven their worth can wield this sword. Damage modifier. 100.120 attack speed. 0.75 generate skill. War cry, details, weight. 80 units restriction. Sword Mastery 5. Adrian checked the skill War Cry and was amazed because with this skill embedded in the broadsword its value would become higher. Skill. War Cry tier. Epic type. Buff effect. Produce an invigorating yell that empowers you and all your allies that are in the vicinity or is able to hear your shout. Doubles the caster's stats for 10 seconds while her allies gains 50% stat increase for the same duration. Cannot be used during silenced state. Cooldown. 10 minutes cast time. Instant skill cost. 10 stamina and 10 mana points. A skill that not only doubles the user's stats for 10 seconds but also his allies is very useful especially for those who loves to be in hunting parties. 10 seconds may not be a lot of time from a non-gamer's perspective but for professional gamers or any gaming enthusiast would say that every second is precious because it only takes a split second for someone to turn the tides of battle in their favor. He then looked at the skill book's descriptions. Skill book. Knockback arrow tier. Rare type. Arrow enchantment effect. Charge your arrow with a force capable of knocking back your opponent by 10 meters. Deals 75% of your total physical damage to the target. Cooldown. 3 minutes cast time. Instant skill cost. 50 mana points restrictions. Bow Mastery or Weapons Mastery Skillbook. Chain Lightning tier. Rare type. Active effect. Call forth the power of lightning in your hands and cast it 10 meters in front of you. The first enemy hit will be dealt with 100% of your magic damage while succeeding targets receive 5% less magic damage per enemy hit until 50% magic damage decrease. Succeeding targets must at least be 3 meters near the initial target for the lightning to spread. Max number of targets. 10 cooldown. 10 minutes cast time. Instant skill cost. 300 mana points restrictions. Magic class related job class skillbook. Stampede tier. Epic type. Active effect. Charges your body forward in a straight line while increasing your movement speed by 200%. All enemies that collides with the user will be stunned for 1 second and be dealt 120% of the caster's total physical damage. Cannot be affected by movement status conditions during the charge. The caster can end the skill early. If the caster collides with a wall or other terrain, she will be stunned for 0.5 seconds. If the user carries a shield it could chain this skill with Shield Bash. Maximum travel distance. 20 meters cooldown. 15 minutes cast time. Instant skill cost. 50 stamina restrictions. Warrior-related job class. Adrian was unable to learn 2 of the 3 skill books that he has obtained but he was not disheartened because when he picked the Deimos race, he already knew the pros and cons. Although he could use the knockback arrow skillbook, it could only be used when he summoned the Bao Psyche armament which would be a waste so he decided to just sell the 3 weapons and the 3 skillbooks. He would also check if he could trade them to other players. Now that he has seen all his material gains, he decided to take a look at his newly acquired title. Title. Goblin Slayer. Description. So you like killing goblins, huh? Effect. Deal 50% more damage when damaging goblins or goblin-related enemies. You are considered the mortal enemy for all of goblin kind. You will be hated by all goblin NPCs and they would choose to kill you rather than help you. This title can be upgraded. Adrian did not know whether to laugh or cry because the title's only benefit is the additional damage towards goblin-type monsters while the rest is more of a punishment. The only silver lining is that the title could be upgraded and it might decrease or erase the downsides of the title. He could only sigh and give up being friends with goblins in this life. Adrian then walked towards the cage where the prisoners were being kept. When Adrian was in front of the cage, instead of being relieved, the prisoners were acting all scared and some even peed themselves. They muttering words to Adrian while kneeling in the ground. "Please, sir. Spare us. Do not hurt us, please," one of the girls who was still able to speak begged. "Do I look that terrifying?" was the thought that floated on Adrian's mind as he has completely forgotten that his glamour was dispelled and he currently looks like a demon. As he was pondering why the prisoners were afraid of him, his soulbounds gathered towards him, and as if pouring more water in a breaking dam, some prisoners fainted because of Sirius and Canlaon's presence. The two soulbounds' presence was the final nail on the coffin for some of the prisoners to retain their consciousness. Chapter 80. Returning to the Paradox Plains. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Adrian was waiting for the prisoners to calm down before he broke the locks on the cage. The prisoners were also looking at him with worry and fear in their eyes, as they fear that the demon in front of them will feed them to his pets. Adrian sighed as he realized that may have been scared by him because he saw his image reflected on a prisoner's eyes and he was in original form. He was thinking casting glamour again, but that may become a poison to his race, as humans would know that their race could deceive the eyes of humans. Adrian then did not wait for the other prisoners to get relaxed as he crushed the lock of the cage. When he inspected the lock on the cage, it said that it had details on how to open it. Item: Common lock tier. Common description: an iron lock that can be forged by any beginner blacksmith. It is made using a combination of metals but mostly iron. A specific key or master key is needed to open it. In order to break it using force, at least 100 strength points is needed. Since Adrian's strength stat already exceeds 100, he casually crushed the lock with his bare hands, which increased the fear and terror of the prisoners that kept inside the cage. Some started prostrating and some cried to be spared. Due to their reactions, Adrian frowned as in their eyes he was a terrifying being able to kill them just with his bare hands. Adrian then decided to command them rather than tell them amicably on what they should do. "All of you leave this place and be careful on the way out. A few minutes of walk from here would be the main road, on which would take you about an hour to reach the nearest city." When Adrian spoke those words, the prisoners started thanking him, but there was still fear in their eyes because some think that the demon was only spouting sweet words before he kills them all. Despite Adrian telling them they could leave, the prisoners were still rooted in place because of the fear that those who leave will be struck down and become fodder to the demon's pets. Adrian could only sigh because he could read the prisoners' faces and could more or less guess their judgment. Adrian could no longer linger around here anymore since he already looted everything and the surrounding barracks were devastated because of the black hole his skill generated. The only things rooted were the heavy objects like lumps of metal in a bundle and the metal cage which housed the prisoners. Adrian decided to bid farewell to them first by just walking away from them since he already broke the lock anyways. He was walking away from the prisoners about 30 meters away from them when a notification popped up in his field of vision. "You have successfully cleared the hidden mission in the Save the Prisoners in Secret Thrall Plateau Goblin Encampment Outpost. You have been given 100% experience points as a result. Due to your experience points multiplier, you have gained 300% experience points. Player Equinox has leveled up 3 times. Congratulations, you have now increased your level to 51. Sirius has leveled up 3 times, Canlaon has leveled up 3 times, Sina has leveled up 3 times. Adrian was very happy with the unexpected reward that he was given. No wonder there were prisoners there in the dungeon. It was set up as a hidden mission for those who finished the instance dungeon as a reward if they were observant enough. Adrian tore up the teleportation scroll leading to the Paradox Plains because he would as Askeladd on how to refine his core. Little did Adrian know that saving the prisoners would give a small ripple in the country that the dungeon was located, because he did not investigate that one of the prisoners was actually a daughter of a noble that was reported missing. If Adrian did not wreck the place, he would have seen the piles of armor and weapons bearing a crest of a noble, but alas, he concluded that walking away was the most he could do since the prisoners feared him. Adrian and his soulbounds was teleported back to the Paradox Plains. Adrian was still exhilarated at the sight of the Paradox Plains because the place felt mystical in a way. The sky was like gazing at the cosmos itself, and the houses were of a crystal that absorbs light and twinkles that gives the effect that the stars themselves fall down and shine their beauty to the surroundings. Adrian was supposed to head straight to Askelar's abode when he realized that he is running empty on potions department, so he first headed towards Gianna's shop. Due to the hotfix, the potions were also updated. Back then healing and mana potions could sustain a player's health and mana every 25% interval up to 100, but now the developers scrapped that ever since players hit the upper hundreds in terms of level. Potions were now updated to heal a specific health or mana point number, unlike the previous percentage health or mana restoration. There was tension between the player and the developers at first because of the big change, but the developers' reason was valid. We updated the restoration potions because we concluded that it was not productive to rely on potions as a measure of healing oneself. We hope that by updating and adding more potion recipes, the players would think more and plan more of their upcoming battles rather than charging head-on, since they knew that they have a fallback plan. The developers did not erase the percentage health potions but only increased the crafting mastery for the creation of one. At the beginning, low recovery potions that healed a person's health or mana by 25% can be crafted by a beginner alchemist. Now only Intermediate Alchemist Mastery 7 can craft low recovery potions. Only Master Alchemists can craft medium recovery potions, and so on. The players who stock up on these percentage health potions thought they could score an easy way of getting money, and they did, but realized that they lost more since now only NPCs can craft them, and these NPCs only craft about 100. There was only a handful of players in the Intermediate Alchemist department, which some are already affiliated with guilds. Also, there was still no one who has achieved Intermediate Mastery 7 in alchemy according to the player base. The highest known is a player known as Smoking Grass that is an Intermediate Alchemist Mastery 3. Sub-job classes that focuses on production was difficult to increase in mastery, unlike some adventurer-type sub-job classes like the Explorer or Forager sub-job class. In order to increase to an intermediate mastery in production classes, one needed weeks or a few months of successes and failures in crafting. But once someone hit intermediate mastery, one would need perseverance and a lot of resources, which is why only large guilds could hire these types of players, because the large guilds could give them access to resources. Adrian arrived at Gianna's shop and was greeted by the same promiscuous person herself. Adrian chatted a bit before looking at the things that are for sale. As he suspected, the potions were changed and now it included different potions that restore both health and mana at the same time, or potions that increase a bit of health and damage. The shop's catalog is now full of different potions. The percentage recovery potions were still there but only low on stock and now more expensive than before. When Adrian mentioned a golem core that he got when he defeated a golem, Gianna's eyes sparkled and told Adrian to show her the core. Gianna took great interest in the core and decided to buy the golem core from Adrian, since she told him that it was still usable since a bit of life force is retained, which was rare for golem cores. Once a golem dies, the golem's core would just become an empty husk with no life energy inside, but the mud golem core was different. Adrian exchanged it with 5 complete recovery potions that was increased from 3 due to Adrian haggling the price. Adrian also bought a lot of potions worth 100 gold, which 2 of them was the low health recovery potion. He thinks it was a good investment as he might not have more chances on stockpiling potions when he spends a lot of time at the field. In 30 minutes anyway, the Execution Blade skill book would be sold since its price did not increase anymore for the past hour. The cost now exactly is 18,500 gold, which is quite hefty for an epic skill book. Adrian wanted to sell the legendary skill book in his inventory but decided to put in a player auction instead, as the commission fee would only be dependent on the merchant hosting the player auction. Adrian chatted a little more with Gianna before bidding her goodbye and walking towards his scribe master's workplace. Adrian decided to ask his mentor, Ernest, if he knows how to form his core, since Gianna's answer was, "It is about love or something," which Adrian did not understand since she was either being cryptic or teasing Adrian.